tonight on NewsCenter. North Korea fires missiles, calls all cooperation deals with South Korea void, and says it will liquidate all South Korean assets left behind in the now shuttered joint industrial complex. Seoul will not condone such moves. Korea's central bank stands pat on interest rates as its chief suggests he is not ready to ease policy anytime soon. It's dampened bond future prices and bolstered the Korean won. And in March 2011, Japan was struck by a devastating trifecta: earthquake, tsunami, and a nuclear meltdown. 5 years later, we return to Fukushima, where it's still very much an ongoing crisis. NewsCenter begins right now. It is 8 a.m. in New York, 12 noon in London, and 10 on a Thursday night here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to our viewers all across the globe. You're watching Arirang News Center. North Korea says it'll liquidate all South Korean assets left behind in the now shuttered joint industrial park in the North Korean city of Kaesong in the latest show of defiance against multiple sanctions from the UN, US, and South Korea, among others. Now, that complicates things for the South, which is sitting on a request from a humanitarian foundation that wants to make an aid shipment to the North. Our Connie Kim has our top story tonight.
North Korea has announced it'll scrap all inter-Korean economic cooperation and exchange projects in retaliation against South Korea's new independent sanctions on the regime. The statement from the North's Committee for the Peaceful Reunification of the Fatherland on Thursday said the regime will liquidate all South Korean assets in the north as Seoul shut down the Mount Kumgang Tor project and the Kaesong industrial complex. It also said its military has switched to a preemptive attack mode and is waiting for the final command with the presidential office of Cheongwade as a primary target. The statement comes on the heels of South Korea's announcement on Tuesday of stiff new sanctions on Pyongyang, which followed the UN Security Council's latest resolution against the North. The South Korean sanctions blacklist includes more than 30 individuals and 20 entities that were not on the UN list and strengthens the maritime sanctions on the regime. South Korea has condemned North Korea's statement, adding that liquidating South Korean assets is an unacceptable provocative act.
North Korea must not destroy South Koreans' property. If it does, it will have to be responsible for all the consequences.
South Korean assets in the north are estimated to mount up to some $1.2 billion. But even as North Korea continues with its belligerent rhetoric, South Korea also says it's reviewing whether to approve a U.S.-based Humanitarian Foundation's request to ship medicine to tuberculosis patients in the north. Seoul's sanctions included stronger controls on imports and exports to and from North Korea, but aid to infants and pregnant women was an exception. If Seoul says no, it could further endanger the more than 1,500 North Koreans who have reportedly contracted tuberculosis. If South Korea gives the foundation the green light, it'll be Seoul's first decision on humanitarian aid since North Korea's nuclear test in early January. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Well, earlier this morning, North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea. Now, experts view this as a protest against the ongoing annual joint military drills between Seoul and Washington. Our Kim Hyun-bin has more on this development.
South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff says the 2 missiles were fired at around 5:20 a.m. from North Hwanghae province, which borders South Korea. The missiles flew around 500 kilometers before falling into the East Sea and are presumed to be a type of Scud missile. The South Korean military says that it is looking into the situation and is prepared to deal with any future provocations.
The missiles look to be Scuds. Our PAC-3 missiles are currently in operation, but if THAAD were deployed, it would complement our missile defense system.
The Defense Ministry spokesperson was making a pitch for the advanced U.S. missile defense system called THAAD that's under discussion between the two allies. North Korea, which is banned from testing ballistic missiles under UN resolutions, has been ratcheting up its provocations against the annual round of military exercises called Key Resolve and Full Eagle. The drills started Monday and are the largest in scale to date.
North Korea fired several rockets from its 300mm multiple rocket launchers earlier this month and fired short-range missiles on Thursday in what's being seen as an armed protest against the recent UN sanctions and the South Korea-US military drills.
The North has a history of launching provocations during the annual springtime drills, which Seoul and Washington maintain are purely defensive in nature.
Experts say Seoul should be prepared for additional provocation from North Korea during the drills, including more short-range missile launches and cyber attacks. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
China voiced its approval of South Korea's independent sanctions on North Korea earlier this week. But today, Seoul's foreign ministry says Beijing still shares a common goal with South Korea when it comes to punishing the North for its violations. Our foreign affairs correspondent, Kwon So-ah.
Seoul's foreign ministry says Beijing shares the same principle and goal as South Korea in that North Korea's nuclear activities are unacceptable. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Cho Jun-hyuk said Thursday the government believes China also shares a common methodology with South Korea in dealing with North Korea's provocations, seen in China's active cooperation in drafting the recently adopted UN Security Council resolution. This as a day before China's foreign ministry opposed South Korea's independent sanctions released earlier this week, saying the punitive measures do not provide a way to solve the issue of Pyongyang's provocations, adding that the sanctions should not harm China's legitimate interests.
China shares the same view in that North Korea must pay the price for its recent nuclear and missile threats. Accordingly, Seoul explained to Beijing the plans to impose independent sanctions prior to announcing them.
Cho added that South Korea will continue to hold multidimensional and constructive talks with China on the issue and lead North Korea towards giving up its nuclear weapons program. That's also going to be a key agenda in Washington this week, when South Korea's representative to the stalled six-party talks, Kim Hong-kyun, will meet with his U.S. counterpart Sung Kim on Friday at follow-up discussions on South Korea-U.S. cooperation on pressuring and bringing about changes to Pyongyang. During his first overseas trip since taking office as Seoul's top nuclear envoy late last month, Kim may also discuss Washington's implementation on the new UN sanctions on North Korea and its independent sanctions on the regime. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
President Park Geunhye spent the day in her political hometown of Daegu today, a city in the country's southeast. Now, there she threw her support on the administration's job creation and economic revitalization initiatives, and she also shed light on various sectors she believes have the potential to grow much bigger. Our top office correspondent Song Ji-sun has this report.
The city of Daegu in Gyeongsangbuk-do province is a traditional conservative stronghold. President Park Geunhye was born in its city and entered the parliament through a by-election for one of its districts. The historic textile factory town is also home to Korea's largest conglomerate, Samsung, which was founded in 1938. On Thursday, just 6 months since her last visit, President Park was back in her hometown to promote her vision for job creation through new growth engines. She kicked off the day with a visit to the Daegu Innovation Center, which was the first of the nation's 17 newly built creative economy hubs to be launched.
창조경제혁신센터와 규제 프리존을 통해 경북 각 번역의 전략 산업에 걸맞는 자유로운 산업 환경을 창출하고 교통망 구축을 비롯해서 경북 발전을 촉진할 여건 조성에 최선을 다하겠습니다.
Next, she dropped by the International Textile Fair, where she said traditional textile manufacturers have the potential to become models of the creative economy through modernization in collaboration with the ICT sector. The president also attended a forum aimed at promoting the sports sector, held in the city that hosted the 2011 World Athletics Championships and the Summer Universiade in 2003. At the event, the first of its kind, President Park vowed to relax regulations on the sector, which has a market size that's twice as big as the tourism industry. She also pledged to turn sports into a culture and an industry for all, not just elite athletes, which is the case in Korea. The president wrapped up her visit by attending the opening ceremony for Gyeongsangbuk-do's new provincial office building, where she called for balanced regional growth and new growth engines for the future. 송지선, Arirang News.
Over in Seoul's National Assembly, it was the final day of the current parliamentary session, but lawmakers remained at loggerheads over a series of contentious bills. Well, the start of the next section on Friday may provide a new opportunity for compromise, but with preparations for the upcoming general election already underway, that standstill is at risk of being overshadowed. Our political correspondent Kim Young-gil has more.
The ruling Saenuri Party on Thursday said it is determined to see several key bills passed during the next parliamentary session that starts on Friday, and at least before a general election in April.
There are roughly 30 days until the election, but we must not give up our goal of passing these livelihood bills. For the sake of the people, the opposition party should cooperate in passing these key bills during the March extraordinary session.
The ruling party wants to see the passage of 4 labor reform bills, a service sector promotion bill, and a cyber-terrorism bill before the 19th National Assembly ends in May. It says the labor reform and service sector bills will boost job creation and revitalize the economy, while the cyber-terrorism bill will help prevent cyber attacks from abroad. But the main opposition Minju Party of Korea, under pressure from both the ruling party and the presidential office to rubber stamp the bills, called on both to stop.
It's just redundant for the Saenuri Party to keep pressuring us to pass the bills that President Park Geunhye wants passed. She creates a mood of crisis, the National Intelligence Service sides with her, and then she urges the Assembly to pass the bills.
With the general election just around the corner, there is some concern about when and if the two parties can negotiate a compromise. Already the focus has turned to the election, with each party naming more candidates for the April 13th contest. The ruling Saenuri Party's list includes candidates who will run in 31 districts, including 6 districts in Seoul. The Minju Party of Korea issued a list of candidates who will run in 44 districts, including the names of 5 incumbent lawmakers who will not be allowed to run, as the party seeks fresh faces to make itself more competitive. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Korea's central bank kept interest rates unchanged for a 9th straight month, largely in line with market expectations, opting to monitor policy meetings in other advanced economies and the global economy. And this just coming in, the European Central Bank has cut its interest rate, surprising financial markets by dropping its refinancing rate to 0. Our Hwang Ji-hye reports.
The Bank of Korea has put more weight on taming market volatility than tackling the fizzling economy, as it decided to keep its key interest rate unchanged at a record low for the 9th straight month on Thursday. Citing an ease in plunging oil prices and improving economic data from the U.S. as upside potentials, the top central banker said that more monetary easing is unnecessary at the moment.
The current 1.5% key rate is accommodative enough. It's true that it could be more accommodative if we lower it further, but monetary policymakers all agree that it's already supportive.
Facing slumping exports and sluggish domestic demand, the central bank had been under mounting pressure to cut the interest rate to give a much-needed boost to the economy. But many economists, including the BOK governor, have been questioning whether a rate cut could actually reinvigorate the economy. This, especially as the central bank is already juggling so many other issues like the household debt load that stands at around $1 trillion.
When we see the household debt growth, the rate has not been contained in February, even if there was a macroprudential measures taking effect from the 1st of February. We think a rate cut at this time would do more side effects than benefits to the economy.
A rate cut could also exacerbate instability in local financial markets that saw almost $4 billion worth of foreign capital leaving Korea's bond market this year. Now, some analysts say a rate cut could come as early as next month when the central bank releases its new growth outlook for the year. But others say that is unlikely, as the BOK will want to leave more options on the table in light of a monetary policy board member reshuffle at the end of April. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Well, AlphaGo surprised the world yesterday by defeating its human opponent, grandmaster Lee Se-dol. But it looks like it wasn't a fluke. It has its second victory under its sleeves. The game was even more intense than yesterday's today, with the session lasting an hour more compared to Wednesday's match. Now, the next question is, how was this even possible? Lee Ji-won has more.
Another win for AlphaGo. The second game of Baduk, also known as Go, between Grandmaster Lee Se-dol of Korea and artificial intelligence supercomputer AlphaGo ended after 211 moves. The game seemed to be in Lee's favor as he had higher points than AlphaGo throughout the game. Commentators too thought he almost got this round under his belt. But they were wrong. AlphaGo was in control of the game from the very start. The machine continuously made very original moves that professional Baduk players would not normally make. The computer's creative moves were especially evident early in the game, as its 13th move was completely unprecedented, making Lee leave his seat for about 5 long minutes. Lee countered these moves well, taking more time to make the best decision. Unlike Wednesday's game, he was not quick to attack where AlphaGo had made mistakes. But with AlphaGo silently but surely following Lee's every move, the machine eventually ended up victorious.
Today's game was a complete defeat. I found a number of weak points during yesterday's game, but today I could not find any weakness from AlphaGo.
If Lee loses again, AlphaGo will be declared the winner. But does Lee have any tricks up his sleeve to keep that from happening? We'll find out more on Saturday's match. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, with all this commotion over the epic man versus machine game of Baduk, also known as Go, you may be wondering how this game is played. Well, our Oh Soo-young gives us an explanation of the rules so that you can try playing a quick round for yourself.
It's all about marking your territory. Baduk, also known as Go, is an ancient game of strategy that originated in China around 3,000 years ago. It spread to Korea and Japan during the 1st century and still enjoys great popularity today, with its centuries-old rules remaining intact. The game is played by placing black and white stones by 2 players on an empty grid marked with lines, usually 19 by 19, and the player with the black stones always goes first. The stones are laid in turn on the intersections to form a group, expanding a player's territory vertically or horizontally. Diagonal moves don't count. You get points by capturing your opponent's stones, which you do by surrounding them with your own on the so-called liberties or vacant intersection points around the stones. Another way to gain points is by counting the number of vacant spots inside your territory. Although the rules are simple, winning is never easy, as the tactical possibilities of the game are practically endless. A session can last for hours and it ends when neither player wishes to make another move. Points are added up at the end of the session, and extra points called tom are bestowed to the player with white stones as a compensation for taking the second turn. Baduk is said to be a game that rewards virtues such as patience and balance, as it requires a high level of concentration and self-discipline. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Five years ago, on March 11th, the world watched in devastation as Japan got struck by a tragic trifecta. To mark the anniversary of its worst disaster since the war, we went to Fukushima's ground zero to find out how the people, the land, the community is dealing with the crisis 5 years later. Part 1 of my 2-part series. The hell that broke loose on March 11, 2011, was the strongest earthquake in Japan's history. When the shaking stopped, a tsunami, Almost 20,000 people died in the flood. Those who survived would soon face a man-made disaster, the world's worst nuclear disaster in a quarter century. Lifeless, decaying, desolate. Big towns, small towns, all ghost towns. We drive towards the cause of all this, towards the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. We're in the exclusion zone. These barriers mark the start of the no-go zone around the crippled nuclear reactor. The visible remnants of the disaster tell only part of the story of misery wrought by nature's fury. Another face of the crisis. Unseeable, though measurable, radiation haunts the land. This is Tomioka, roughly 7 kilometers from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. More than 11,000 residents left this town on March 12, 2011, the day after the earthquake and tsunami hit. This part of Japan is known for its agriculture, but today, the only crop growing are multitudes of black bags holding radioactive materials that will have to be stored for generations. Nine million cubic meters all throughout Fukushima Prefecture, in rice fields, roadsides, people's backyards. Some of the dead zone will never return to life, even as teams of workers across Fukushima scrub down houses, cut branches, and scrape contaminated soil off farmland every single day. Once a town of 16,000 people, the population today, 0. The clock here at this school has stopped. The disaster seems to have stopped time in this town. But a few kilometers to the south, the authorities are preparing to declare that Minamisoma, another city within the evacuation area, is now safe for evacuees to return. On the day we visited, the municipal assembly was holding a briefing session, presenting documents that yearly radiation doses in the area have dropped to levels low enough for the evacuation orders to be lifted.
全ての非測定者の被爆線量は健康影響が心配されるレベルでの値ではありませんでしたと。このうち除染の範囲っていうのはどれだけになって、そのうちの何%かでしょ。生きててこれから10年、20年、30年のデータ、どこに根拠があるんですか。100% にしてから解除していただきたいと思います。
Distrust of government announcements runs deep among residents here.
The government says it's safe for us to move back because radiation levels are below its standard, but everybody is against moving back. The cleanup isn't complete, children can't go back, and there is no infrastructure to carry out daily lives.
I've managed to stay alive for 75 years. I'm not going back there. I don't want to die because of radiation.
Tomio Kokubun is an anti-nuclear power activist and an evacuee of Minamisoma himself. He says parts of the town are still highly contaminated. Forests were excluded from decontamination work, although these trees have absorbed enormous amounts of radioactive fallout.
The most dangerous isotope is cesium-137. Cesium-137 is capable of penetrating the human skin, even concrete.
Mountainous forests make up 70% of Fukushima Prefecture.
Trees take up radioactive cesium and iodine and store them for a long time. So trees emit radiation. They will continue to emit radiation for a long, long time.
Masakatsu Suzuki has been making frequent visits recently to his house standing on the edge of the evacuation zone. After 5 years of hopping among his children's homes and temporary housings, he's ready to move back.
My late wife and I built this house together. It may seem old and plain to others, but this is my home. This town is where I was born.
The 78-year-old has been working on his garden, trimming overgrown trees, pruning shrubs, cleaning up the mess he left behind 5 years ago, when the triple meltdown rendered this municipality unsafe to live.
Young people shouldn't come back to live here. Children can't come back. But as for old people like myself, we don't know how many years we have left anyway. I want to spend the last of my years here at home. I want to die in this house.
But Suzuki is one of the very few who plans to come back. This town within a 20-kilometer radius from the nuclear power plant has been a no-go zone for the past 5 years. Now, the Japanese government wants to lift that evacuation order. But whether this town can return to its pre-March 11, 2011 remains uncertain, as the residents are now fearful that the radiation levels are not safe enough. Myanmar's ruling National League for Democracy has nominated an aide to the party leader Aung San Suu Kyi as the country's presidential candidate. Now, the pro-democracy leader, who cannot run for president this time due to a clause in the constitution, said she will nevertheless rule above the president. Park Ji-won has this report.
Myanmar's lower house, led by the country's pro-democracy icon Aung San Suu Kyi, has nominated 69-year-old Tin Chaw, a close aide to Suu Kyi and senior executive of a charity foundation, as its leading presidential candidate on Thursday. With Suu Kyi's party holding the majority of the parliament, the Oxford graduate presidential candidate is widely expected to become Myanmar's first democratically elected head of state in about 50 years.
We have high hopes for him. He was chosen by our party. I have been working together for many years with Tin Chaw. We have made so many sacrifices, such as spending time in prison. That's why I believe in him. I'm happy for him.
Under Myanmar's indirect presidential election system, 3 candidates are submitted by the lower and upper houses each, and the last one recommended by the military. The president is elected through a vote by a selection of names put forward by lawmakers, and the losing candidates will become vice presidents. Reuters reported, quoting a local source, that the final presidential vote would probably take place on Monday, but the date is yet to be confirmed. Aung San Suu Kyi, whose party won nearly 80% of the parliament seats last November, will not be able to run for the presidency this time. According to the constitution, which was drafted by the then ruling military junta in 2008, anyone whose spouse or children have foreign nationality is barred from becoming the country's head of state. Both of Suu Kyi's adult sons are British citizens. But she made it clear that she will rule above the president until she can amend the current constitution. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
A senior commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard tells state media there that Iran's missile program will not be stopped under any circumstance. Bruce Harrison is live in the studio with me. Now, Bruce, Iran has drawn international concern over its launching of missiles. Now, why so many tests this week?
What we've heard, Kanyang, is that Iran is simply exercising its right to develop its self-defense capabilities, though the tests are seen by the West, at least, as a challenge to the nuclear deal Tehran reached last year with world powers. Iran's foreign ministry says the launches don't violate that deal, and the country has to protect itself, in particular, from its enemy, Israel.
Naturally, the more that we are pressured and face sanctions from our enemies, the more we will have to rely on our own resources to counter these threats.
The U.S. has said it's aware of the tests and is reviewing an appropriate response. The United Nations says its humanitarian efforts in war-torn Syria have made great progress to provide relief to people in besieged areas, and they hope to assist many more. The UN Humanitarian Coordinator in Syria says between now and the end of next month, they aim to reach 870,000 people in hard-to-reach areas.
But we are working
on all of these, and the hope is that in the next few days, with the help of members of the task force, we will be able to complete deliveries and reach to the thousands of people trapped in these places.
Over the past 4 weeks, the UN and its partners sent hundreds of trucks with aid supplies to nearly 240,000 people.
Now, Bruce, aid groups agreed to launch relief efforts after reports were confirmed that thousands of people were starving there.
In many places throughout Syria, and for a while they couldn't get there because of the fighting, but under a current ceasefire, aid groups are taking advantage of that window and getting some help to these people.
And Syrian peace talks are supposed to be resumed in the next couple of days.
Opposition has indicated it's willing to come to the table to an extent.
All right, Bruce, thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Well, we're more than halfway into the second week of March, but winter seems reluctant to leave. Let's go straight over to our Lee Ji-hyun at the Weather Center. Ji-hyun, what is with this cold spell?
I know it is so cold, right? The entire nation was swept by a cold spell today, with conditions making everyone bundle up from head to toes.
You can say that again. Hopefully the weather won't last too long.
Fortunately, I can say yes, but the cold snap will reach its peak tomorrow, with the low in Seoul dropping down to -5 degrees Celsius. That's about 5 degrees lower than seasonal averages, but at least daily highs will a couple of degrees higher than today. Clear skies will dominate the whole nation and will continue to have the clean air, but beware of dry conditions, as a dry weather advisory has been expanded into more parts of the peninsula, including here in the capital. On that note, let's go over to tomorrow's temperature readings. A winter-like morning in store, with a daily low kicking off at -5 degrees Celsius here in Seoul, -2 over in Daegu. Even Busan will start out the day at 0. And as for the daily highs, Seoul will top out at 5 for Daejeon as well, while Daegu and Busan should peak at 7 and 9 respectively. But on a rather warmer note, the cold snap will dissipate by Sunday, allowing spring to make its long-awaited presence by Sunday afternoon. Now that's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Now, tomorrow, March 11th, marks exactly 5 years since the great earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown in Japan. And part 2 of our special report will air tomorrow during NewsCenter. That is a broadcast on this Thursday night. I'm Moon Gun-young. Thank you as always for watching, and we hope to see you right back here, same time tomorrow on NewsCenter.